The cab pulled up to the curb, and I sat there for a second. Just breathing. 6 months in Fairbanks. Alaska running emergency trauma contracts at a short-staffed regional hospital. 6 months of 18-hour shifts. Frostbite warnings. And sleeping in a cot in the staff lounge when the roads iced over. And now I was finally home. My hands were still in my lap when I looked up through the window. The first thing I saw was the dumpster. It was parked in my driveway, a massive industrial roll-off. The kind construction crews use when they're gutting an entire house. The second thing I saw was my bookshelf. The oak one my grandmother left me. It was sticking out of the top of the dumpster at an angle. One shelf already snapped off. My nursing certification frames were next to it, face down in the debris, standing on my front porch. Holding glasses of iced tea like they were at a Sunday barbecue were my mother and my younger sister. My mother didn't wave. She just tilted her head and gave me a look I recognized from childhood. The look that meant she had already decided how this conversation was going to go, and she expected me to fall in line. My sister didn't even look up from her phone. Before I tell you what I found inside that house, and the single piece of paper that made everything they'd done completely worthless. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this reaches. I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I paid the cab driver, picked up my bag, and started walking up the path I had laid with my own hands 2 summers ago. One paver stone at a time. After a double shift. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and I have spent the last 9 years learning one thing above everything else. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who looks like they have nothing left to lose but actually came prepared. I had been prepared for this for 8 months. My mother spoke first. She had always been the one who spoke first. "We weren't sure exactly when you were coming back," she said, as if that explained the dumpster. As if that explained the fact that the living room curtains I'd chosen were gone and replaced with ones I'd never seen before. "Clearly," I said. My voice was even. I had practiced even. My sister finally looked up. "Her Name ist Daniela. And she is 26 years old and has never in her life paid a bill on time." She smiled at me with the particular brightness of someone who believed she had already won. "Mom said you'd be dramatic about it," she said. "It's just a transition. Claire. Everybody needs to be flexible. Flexible." I almost laughed. I looked at my mother. "You want to tell me what's in the dumpster? Things that needed to go," she said. The place needed freshening up. Danielle has been under so much stress. The situation with Marcus, she caught herself. Pivoted. The situation she's been dealing with has been really hard on her. And she needed stability. "You're always moving around for work. You don't really live here." There it was. The sentence I had been waiting for. I had heard a version of it my entire life. "You don't really need it. Claire. You're fine. Claire." Danielle is struggling. Danielle had been struggling since the day she discovered that struggling was a currency she could spend. "How long has she been here?" I asked. 4 months. My mother said. 4 months. I had been gone 6. Danielle had moved in 2 months after I left. And the dumpster. My mother waved her hand. "She's redoing the bedroom. It needed updating. It was my bedroom." "Well," my mother took a sip of her iced tea. "About that," I looked at her. I looked at Danielle. Danielle was examining her manicure now. Bored in the theatrical way she performed when she wanted you to know she found you beneath her attention. "We had a conversation," my mother said carefully. "And we all agreed I wasn't part of that conversation. That with the money Danielle owes and the trouble she's in, the most sensible thing was to take out a home equity line against the property. $45,000. It's already been drawn." The air went out of the porch, not out of my lungs. I had known this was possible. I had actually considered 8 months ago that something like this might happen. That is why I had spent $340 and one very long Thursday afternoon at a title company office before I ever boarded the plane to Alaska. But standing there, hearing my mother say it out loud, $45,000 drawn against my house. My oak bookshelf in a dumpster. My sister bored and polished and completely unsorry on the porch I painted. Something in me went very cold and very focused. Who authorized it, I asked. I did. My mother said, I have your power of attorney. She said it like a closing argument. Like she had just laid down the final card and now we could all go inside and have lemonade and move on with the new arrangement. She had the paperwork. She had the signatures. She had Danielle's desperation as a moral justification and years of practice turning my objections into selfishness. She thought she had everything. Can I see the documents, I asked? My mother blinked. She had expected crying. Or anger. Or the door-slamming exit she could later describe to her friends as evidence that I was always too emotional. She had not expected that question in that tone. She recovered quickly, though. She always did. They're inside. We can go over everything later once you've settled down. I'm not unsettled. I said. I'd like to see them now. She hesitated just a fraction too long. Danielle stepped in to fill the silence the way she always did. Using up oxygen in a room without adding anything to it. This is exactly what she does, she said to our mother, not bothering to lower her voice. Acts like everything is a crisis. I have been dealing with actual problems. Claire. Real honest. You have no idea what it's been like. I looked at my sister. She had on new jeans I had never seen. A silk blouse that still had the faint rectangular impression of a boutique fold across the front, and earrings that caught the afternoon light with the particular flash of something recently purchased. Her nails were freshly done. She smelled like a perfume I recognized from the mall counter, where it ran about $90 a bottle. She was doing just fine. What happened to your money? I asked her directly. Her chin came up. I've had expenses. $45,000 worth. My situation is complicated. Danielle. I kept my voice level. What happened to your money? The brightness flickered. Something real crossed her face for just a second. Something that looked like guilt? Before she covered it again with composure. I had some investments that didn't work out, she said stiffly. And some debt that needed to be handled before it became a real problem. Mom helped me. That's what family does. Family. There was that word. The one that had been used my entire life as both a weapon and a leash. I had bought this house at 24. I had worked nights and weekends and taken every high-acuity travel contract I could find. The ones other nurses turned down because they were too remote or too demanding or the weather was too brutal. I had lived on oatmeal and stubbornness for 2 years until I had a down payment. I signed the mortgage on a Tuesday afternoon. Alone. Because my mother thought it was a lot of money for a house I didn't need, and my sister had borrowed $50 from me the week before and never mentioned it again. I remembered sitting in my empty living room that first night. No furniture yet. Just me, on the floor with a takeout container and the quiet understanding that this one place, was mine. Nobody had given it to me. Nobody had a claim on it. I had been wrong about that last part. Apparently, I'd like to come inside. I said. My mother stepped aside. She did it with the magnanimous grace of someone granting a courtesy, which I found interesting given that it was my house. Inside, the living room had been rearranged. My furniture was still there. Mostly. But shifted around and accessorized with throw pillows I'd never bought, and a gallery wall of prints that were not mine. The kitchen had a new coffee maker on the counter, and Danielle's collection of cookbooks stacked on the shelf where I kept my medical reference texts. There was a half-consumed bottle of wine on the counter with 2 glasses. They had been comfortable here. That was the word for it. They had settled in with the confidence of people who had decided the question of ownership was already resolved. My mother had followed me inside. She stood by the kitchen island with her arms loosely crossed, watching me take inventory. The equity line was necessary, she said, her voice shifting now into its reasoning register. The tone she used when she was explaining why something she'd done was actually for my benefit. Danielle's creditors were calling every day. The interest was compounding. $45,000 was enough to clear her primary debt and give her breathing room. You have a good income. Claire, you can absorb this. Danielle cannot. You drew against my house? I said, to pay my sister's debts. We are a family. You didn't ask me. You were unavailable. I was in Alaska, not on the moon. I had a phone. Her jaw tightened. You would have said no. She said it without apology. She said it as though the fact that I would have refused was the problem, not what they had done. My objection was the obstacle. My boundaries were the inconvenience. This was the family logic I had grown up inside of. And it was airtight in its own way. It simply redefined any resistance I offered as a character flaw. So you used the power of attorney instead. I said, it was legal. I had your signature. You had my signature for medical decisions? I said quietly. I signed a limited medical power of attorney before I deployed to Alaska in case something happened to me in the field. In case I was in an accident and couldn't make decisions for myself. My mother's arms tightened slightly. A limited medical power of attorney. I continued. Authorizes you to make healthcare decisions on my behalf. It does not authorize you to encumber real property. It does not give you the ability to take out a home equity line of credit, execute loan documents, or pledge my house as collateral for anything. The kitchen went very quiet. Danielle had appeared in the doorway. I hadn't heard her come in, but she was there now, holding her phone and leaning against the frame. Her earlier boredom replaced by something more alert. The bank accepted it, my mother said. Her voice had changed. The certainty was still there, but underneath it now was something that sounded like the first thread of doubt. We went through the whole process. They reviewed the POA. They approved the loan. Banks make mistakes, I said, especially when a document is presented as broader than it actually is. I didn't misrepresent anything. The loan officer read what you gave them. That doesn't make it valid. Using a limited medical POA to execute a real estate financial instrument is outside the scope of that authorization, which means the HELOC was obtained fraudulently. I paused. And that's the bank's problem. My problem is different. I reached into the front pocket of my travel bag. The document I pulled out was not dramatic to look at. It was a folded, letter-sized paper, and I unfolded it on the kitchen island with both hands, smoothing it flat so my mother could see it clearly. It was a deed. Specifically, it was a certified copy of a deed transfer, signed and notarized 8 months ago. 3 days before I flew to Alaska, I had transferred the title of the property from Claire Whitfield, individual, to the Claire Whitfield Revocable Living Trust. I moved the house into a trust before I left. I said, my attorney drafted it. The deed was recorded with the county. As of 8 months ago, this property is no longer owned by me as an individual. It is held by the trust. I looked at my mother. You don't have authority over the trust. You are not a named trustee. The medical POA you have applies to Claire Whitfield, the person. It has no jurisdiction over assets held by the Claire Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, which means every document you signed at that bank was signed without valid authority. My mother stared at the paper. Danielle pushed off the doorframe and walked over, looking at it over our mother's shoulder. I watched her read the trust seal, the recording stamp, the date. I watched her do the math on the timeline. 8 months ago, before I left, I had known, or at least suspected, that something like this was possible. I had taken the step anyway, quietly, without telling anyone. You set us up, Danielle said. I protected myself. You knew we were going to. She stopped. I knew you might need money. I said, I knew you might ask for it in ways I hadn't agreed to. I took a precaution. That's not a trap. That's just planning. The bank, my mother said slowly, mostly to herself. The bank has the loan documents. They have $45,000 out. Yes? I said, and the loan is secured by property that was not mine to pledge, which means the lien is invalid. The bank is going to want to unwind this. I paused. Which is a problem for you. Not for me. Because you're the one who executed those documents. My mother sat down heavily on one of the kitchen stools. For the first time in the conversation, she looked something other than composed. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was standing in a hole she had dug herself. Danielle, however, was not finished. She had her phone in her hand again, and she was typing something with the rapid, deliberate aggression of someone who had a plan and was committing to it. I have texts, she said, not looking up. From 3 years ago. You offered to help me with money. I have it in writing. I can tell people you promised to support me and then left the country and abandoned me when I needed you. You can tell people whatever you want. I said, I'll put it online. I have followers. I can make your life very uncomfortable. I looked at my sister. She was 26 years old, and she had spent most of those years discovering that discomfort was a lever she could pull on other people when she needed something. She was genuinely good at it. She had made me cry more than once in this kitchen, with the right combination of accusations and tears. And she knew it. Danielle. I said, I asked you to help me move a couch 3 years ago. You said if I paid for your gas, you'd think about it. I'm not worried about your texts. Her jaw tightened. What I'm going to do? I continued. Is call the bank tomorrow morning and inform them that the POA used to authorize the HELOC was limited in scope to medical decisions and did not cover real property transactions. I'm going to provide them with a copy of the original POA document and the trust deed. Their legal department will take it from there. I looked at my mother. They will likely initiate a fraud review. That process may involve law enforcement. I'm not initiating that. That's between you and the bank. You would do that to your own mother. My mother said, it was not a question. It was the last available play, the moral injury. The suggestion that holding her accountable was the real offense. I would do that to someone who took out a loan against my house without my permission. I said, the fact that you're my mother is the reason I'm telling you about it first, instead of just making the call. Silence. The wine bottle on the counter caught the afternoon light. The gallery wall prints looked cheerful and entirely out of place. I thought about the oak bookshelf in the dumpster and my grandmother's voice and the sound the door made the first time I locked it from the inside. I want you both out by Friday. I said, that's 4 days. I'll arrange for the dumpster to be removed and I'll have a locksmith out on Saturday morning. You can't just, Danielle started. I can. It's my house. Or rather, it's my trust's house. Which is actually better for this situation because it means no one else's name is anywhere on the deed. My mother was quiet for a long time. When she finally looked up, her face had gone through something, not remorse, exactly, but a kind of recalculation. The expression of a person who has been running a familiar play for so long that they genuinely hadn't considered it might stop working. I was trying to help her, she said, and I almost believed she believed that. I know. I said, you've been helping Danielle since she was 15. You helped her when she needed lunch money in high school, and we both know she took it from my wallet first. You helped her when she wrecked her first car, and the insurance wouldn't cover it. You helped her when she quit 3 jobs in 2 years. You've been helping Danielle for over a decade, and she is still, every year, in a new crisis. At some point, the helping stops being helping. My mother opened her mouth and closed it again. Danielle had put her phone down. Whatever she had been drafting had apparently not survived contact with the reality of the conversation. I'm not your crisis fund. I said, I'm your daughter. I'm Hare's sister. And I spent 6 months in Alaska working 70-hour weeks in an ICU the size of a high school gym. And I would very much like to sleep in my own bed this weekend. I picked up my bag from the floor where I'd set it. Friday. I said again, I'll have someone help with the logistics if you need it. But the timeline isn't negotiable. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. They had repainted it, a dusty rose color. I'd never have chosen. And Danielle's clothes were in 2 of the 3 closet sections, and there was a half-empty jar of some expensive face cream on my dresser. The bed had been remade with sheets I didn't recognize. I sat down on the edge of it anyway. I was very tired. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been managing their own adrenaline carefully for several hours and can finally, in private, let it run down. I stayed there for a while, listening to the muffled sounds of the house rearranging itself around the aftermath. My mother moving in the kitchen. Danielle's voice. Too low to make out words. Insistent, and then quieter. The refrigerator hum. A car outside. My house. Still. Underneath all of it, I thought about the Thursday afternoon I had spent at the title company. The attorney had walked me through the trust documentation with the brisk efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. I had signed where she pointed, initialed what she told me to initial, paid the fee in cash, and taken the certified copy home in a manila envelope. I had put it in my bag 3 days later when I flew out. I had carried it for 6 months through Alaskan winters, through double shifts and staff shortages, and the particular loneliness of being far away from everything familiar. I had carried it because I had learned, slowly and at real cost, that the people who love you can also be the people most likely to reach into the places you haven't protected. It wasn't cynicism. It was just knowledge. The kind you get not from being suspicious, but from paying attention. On Friday morning, my mother left with 3 suitcases and the new curtains she'd hung in the living room. She didn't say goodbye, but she left a container of the lemon cookies she made when she wanted to communicate something she couldn't say out loud. I left it on the counter. Danielle took longer. She stood in the driveway for a while, next to a car loaded with her things. And I watched from the window. She looked younger than she had in years. Standing there without the performance of confidence she usually wore. Just a 26-year-old woman with too much stuff and a complicated look on her face. I almost went out. I got as far as the front door before I stopped myself. Because I knew what would happen if I did. She would cry. I would feel responsible for the crying. We would have a conversation that ended with me softening something. And she would add that softening to her internal map of what I would and wouldn't tolerate. And in 2 years, we would be back here again with different paperwork. I watched her drive away instead. The bank's fraud review process took 11 weeks. I provided my documents and cooperated fully. I won't detail the legal specifics because my attorney advised against it, but the lien was voided. The HELOC was unwound, and the bank pursued their own recourse with the parties who had authorized the documents. I replaced the bookshelf. Not with a replica, I found something at an estate sale. Heavier oak. More worn, with a small carved detail along the top that the old one hadn't had. I put it in the same corner, and it looked like it had always been there. I repainted the bedroom. Soft green. Close to the color of the waiting room I'd worked in during my second travel contract. The one with the window that looked out over a small stand of birch trees. I had spent a lot of hours looking at that green. The house is quieter than it was before I left. Not empty, just mine. In a way, it is now difficult to mistake. People ask me sometimes, when I tell parts of this story, whether I feel bad about how it ended, whether I wish it had gone differently, whether I should have just talked to them before it got to lawyers and bank reviews and Friday deadlines, and I understand the question. I do. Because I grew up in a family that taught me the answer was always, yes, yes, I should have talked to them. Yes, I should have been more patient. Yes, their needs mattered more than whatever boundary I was trying to maintain. Yes, I owed them the benefit of the doubt until I had absolutely no doubt left, and even then I should probably extend a little more. But I talked to them for 31 years. The trust document took one Thursday afternoon. I know which one actually worked. If you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you, share this. And if you want to know more about revocable living trusts and what they can and can't do, drop trust in the comments. A lot of you are in situations where it matters. And you deserve to understand the tools available to you